Hey guys, thank you for tuning in to ChannelBK. My name is Brian. Welcome to another review. This one is for Kendrick Lamar's To Pimp a Butterfly. Now before I get into it, I know I'm going to go through some petty and obvious things, but if you do like this video, please like. And also, I hope you guys can find other videos on my channel you like for you to subscribe. I have other music reviews, movie reviews, TV reviews, and I'm also really trying to put out original content soon as well. Kendrick Lamar is a Compton rapper, and in a way, this is sort of his second major album, but really I guess his third. He had Section 80 back in 2011, which I never ended up reviewing at the time because I started the channel after it and I didn't get onto that project right away, but I really do like Section 80, and obviously there are some weak parts I think to it, but overall it was a great project. And then the following year in 2012, the critically acclaimed Good Kid, m.A.A.d, which I also acclaimed on my review, even though everybody was stuck up that I said m.A.A.d's name wrong. I'm sorry. Obviously I've gone back to that album and there are little things that I'm kind of about, mainly including things about poetic justice and real. But ever since that, he's been hopping on many of albums, including Oxymoron, My Name Is My Name, These Days. He had 2 verses on the Long Live ASAP album, Marshall Mathers LP 2, You're Dead, the new Tech 9 album. He also jumped on the Radioactive remix by Imagine Dragons, and he had an awesome Grammy performance from it. He had, I guess, inspiration credits on Kanye's song All Day, and he actually had a funny and clever verse on the Lonely Island track YOLO. But I think everybody was more excited about Kendrick over the Control verse of the Big Sean song. And Kendrick at that point pretty much submitted his name in, I guess, the new school of rap. But ever since then, we've been kind of getting little things here and there, but no real songs. Last September, we got the track I, which was on my top tracks of last year, but I really do understand why people don't like it. I've kind of come down a little bit of it, but I really loved it a lot more as I heard it in live performances. Obviously, then as he was promoting that song, as well as the song he did on Colbert, which was cool, he then dropped The Blacker the Berry, which was definitely a song that I really liked. I did a review for it and I haven't come down from it ever since. So it's going to be interesting to see what Kendrick was going to do with this album. We've been hearing from many different sources it was going to be unapologetic, fearful, honest. To me, I don't necessarily think he disappointed. There's a lot in this album in terms of production and lyrics and the concepts to really just grasp. The whole idea that Kendrick is trying to get on this album is obviously based off the title, which I guess is a play on To Kill a Mockingbird, where you take something that is supposedly so beautiful and has reached a certain moment in its life, like the butterfly, and then once it gets to that moment, everything is trying to shroud it in all of this stuff to use it for its own gain, to pimp, and then it sort of demotes that value. And what he's trying to say is that anyone could be that butterfly. And throughout the whole entire album, he keeps reciting parts of sort of a, well, not a poem at the very end of the album, meaning that every part of it is sort of what each track of this album is and sort of the story that he's taking us on and the journey that he's taking us on. Now for me, Kendrick is not like the craziest, like over your head type of rapper, but the thing I like so much is how each of his tracks are kind of a teeny bit easy to at least understand and to really put in, even though you do need multiple listens. But as a concept, it's so fun to keep going back, because then as you know each song, you have to piece everything together, figure out what this is and how this all flows. And that's the fun to me about Kendrick. And I think on this album, he was able to cover so many topics in this storyline of him being at this fame, being shrouded by all this bad, having to go back home, wanting to sort of spread that to his environment and his community that he once grew up with, but then at the end truly being like, I want to be this, as he says in the last track, the next Nelson Mandela. Tracks like Institutionalized, where he does deal with that fame and sort of how he is feeling enamored by it and how he's sort of just living life, but obviously in the hook with Bilal, he's having a somewhat conversation with his grandma telling him that the only way things will change is if you clean up your act, which you need to do. Bilal kills it, Anna Wise I thought did a great job, and Snoop Dogg appears on this track, which obviously isn't like a rappity rap verse, but I think he did a really great job sort of being this conduit of the story. Obviously the first time he puts it in, it connects Kendrick with his friend and their conversation that they're having, but then at the end he's sort of like realizing that Kendrick is sort of lost in a way, which actually leads into the next song, These Walls, which has so many different meanings. Obviously as it starts, as we hear Anna Wise, I'm supposing, moaning, and sort of the sexual tension of this song, it sort of implies many different things, meaning the walls of a woman's vagina and sort of his lust for this woman, but as well as the walls inside his head and being confined, and he keeps going back and forth on it so many times. Like at the end when he sort of mentions the idea that he is holding on to this woman to keep her company while her, I guess, ex is in jail. Production on these two songs was great. I love how Institutionalized sort of had that interesting switch up because it had that nice moody beat and then it just had that nice sort of like deep impact then for the rest of the song, and then These Walls was just so funky. And that's another great thing about this album too. Lots of funk, lots of raw elements, a lot of sort of spoken word sort of stuff, jazz, and there's a lot of sort of like different things going on in a song, whether it be sort of like randomly or sort of it ends a song or starts a song. There's a lot of interesting vocal harmonies, like on tracks Alright leading into For Sale, where I know, stay with me, it sort of sounds like a weird Queen vocal melody. And obviously, Alright was also produced a little bit by Pharrell, and Pharrell sings the hook on it. And then obviously, For Sale has that a little bit in the beginning, but then gets a little bit more atmospheric, and there's a little bit of like a horn near the very end of the track. Something like Hood Politics, which just sounds, it doesn't sound minimalist, but it does exactly what it needs to do for the content and the character that Kendrick is trying to play. Something like Momma, which I know it's gonna sound corny or it's like obvious, but it really does sound like coming home, seeing your family, and sort of like a weird pots and pans sort of beat. I thought it was great. And then the switch up at the end with the part with sort of the whole verse that he actually rapped after when he did his SNL performance. Which is a little bit actually different this time. It sounds a little bit more live because we get to see it's a little bit more in the context of the story, but then it has this incredible spoken word at the end that Kendrick does a cappella. Overall, the production on this I thought was so great. Now, if The Black or the Berry wasn't actually one of the songs that released, I wouldn't have been a little bit thrown off, because in all honesty, when King Kunta linked, that is sort of the most relevant song to what the soundscape is like. Something like Wesley's Theory, or King Kunta, or parts of These Walls, or parts of You. Not to say that there's no like sound of rap sounding song, something like Alright, or The Black or the Berry, or a little bit of How Much a Dollar Costs has that sound with it. But some of my favorite tracks on here, I think my favorite personally is You. I almost kind of got a little bit, I was like kind of on edge the whole time. It has this super like schizophrenic feel. Kendrick is just kind of going off. It has this free jazz that's at that first part. The story that he's telling about how his sister gets pregnant and how he's able to go in front of thousands of people and inspire them, and they say he inspires them, but he's not able to help somebody that is as close to him. And then obviously we see the skit because he is in the hotel room, and then it breaks into sort of this slow paced jazz. And then the way Kendrick is spitting and the character and sort of his real raw passion is just, this track, in my opinion, made me speechless by the end of it, to be honest. I love the tracks from like Momma to Hood Politics and How Much a Dollar Costs as well. Like I said, Momma had this great beat. I love the flow he had, him coming to terms with himself in the second verse saying, you know, I know all this stuff, but I also know bad stuff as well. From being and becoming famous and being sort of bogged down by Lucy and being chased by her. Then Hood Politics, I'm sorry, I know people have a problem with sort of certain things he says in his voice, but I like it, voice and boo-boos and all. Obviously, a lot of the lyrics on here, you know, the Democrats and the Rebloodicans, even though I know that's not necessarily his verse, it's from Jesse Ventura's book. He, you know, spit those verses on Big Boy, and I was taken away by it. And then How Much a Dollar Cost, which, you know, Ron Isley does a great way of ending the track. I think the beat is great, but James Fortenroy, his hook was so great, and I think it might have been because of the production with the way he was singing. He was incredible. And the story on here is how Kendrick is so selfish with all the money he has. He doesn't feel that he needs to give to this homeless man who only needs $1, but he thinks he's going to get it for drugs and alcohol and all that sort of stuff. But we learn that that's actually God, and that How Much a Dollar Costs is a spot out of heaven. Something like Wesley's Theory, which is obviously the opener to this, which had great bass on it by Thundercat, who's also throughout this whole album as well. Flying Lotus did some of the production. George Clinton had a great little intro to the album as well after the main sample. And this is another track too, where it's like it sort of starts very slow and then it kicks into the album with the switch. The only real rap verse on here is actually Rhapsody on Complexion of Zulu Love, which I've heard her name everywhere. I've never actually listened to her. This is the first time, and I'll be honest, the lisp kind of threw me off at first, and I know I have a lisp sometimes, so I'm not gonna like shit on her just because of that. She had such a great verse on that song with Kendrick sort of talking about how there's all these problems that people have with having just different colors of your skin, but then he's also talking about the idea of the real complexion of an African American person. As we all know, like light-skinned and dark-skinned, and he's saying just love everybody for who they are, and she sort of does a lot of that analogy saying, why are you hating this sort of people, and saying these sort of people are inferior to that. She had some clever things about Jay-Z and Beyonce in there as well, including the 12 Years a Slave line. King Kunta I thought was a good track. I sort of, again, love the braggadociousness on it and sort of his oxymoron of the slave, Kunta Kinte from the 18th century, and how he's also calling himself a king, which is sort of a metaphorical thing of being a black man in America, and how he's a king and he has all this money, all this power, all this success in rap and just in general, but he also feels like he has his leg cut off and how he's slowed down and being bogged down by a lot of stuff. This track was just super, so much funk was coming off this track. The finale of this album, Mortal Man, which on a surface, without even all the Tupac stuff, was great, and how Kendrick has been feeling all these sort of ways in his head, and how he wants to be more like Nelson Mandela. He wants to be loved, and he's having all these problems, but he hopes that people can still like him when shit hits the fan. He makes a great reference to Michael Jackson, how it's like, you know, when shit hits the fan, are you still a fan? Even though Michael Jackson gave us great songs, but you're saying he touched these kids. And you know, he's making all these references to people like Malcolm X, JFK, and him just like praying that he could be the next voice of this generation. And then obviously we get the finish of what he's saying to Pac, which is sort of the story of this actual album. To be completely honest, I know people are gonna hate on me for this, but I didn't realize it was him at first, because I thought at the end he was saying Pop, like it was his father. But obviously when I looked back into it, I realized it was Pac, because then when I actually really listened to his voice, I was like, okay, yeah, that's Pac. The way they sort of cut it in together, where he's sort of talking about being a fighter, everyone coming after him, having to overcome all that, and to start from the bottom and to really get to the top. The warnings he's heeding and sort of, you know, all this sort of stuff, and the great part of how Pac sort of says, we're just rapping what our dead homies would have said. And then obviously the poem that sort of encapsulates this whole album, which I personally thought was beautiful. He kind of leaves it up to you to sort of figure out, because Pac sort of doesn't answer him, but honestly, on first listen, I sort of wanted to take it all in, because there is a lot to take in, but at the very end of the day, I personally thought what Kendrick was trying to portray on this album, of a lot of these black ideas and these black stereotypes, he put it all together with some great musical elements, great lyrics, a great concept, and to me, it's really great. He really just is such a great artist. It's so cool to see him progress and to see where he's trying to become and what he wants to be for people. What you guys think of this album? There's gonna be very divided people. People are gonna be like just really hating it, or people that are gonna be really loving it and hating why people don't like it. Let's be respectful in the comments. What are some of your favorite tracks? Leave them in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to ChannelBK. Peace out, guys.